went down to the South Island at some point then.
Oh yes, that was 1947. That was a year to remember. We went to the South Island on the Rangatira to Christchurch, the ferry ran, and we went over with intent to walk the Milford Track because a friend of ours, Reg Gilbert, his family knew a family who ran a cattle station in the Hollyford Valley. So anyway, I got interested in that. So I went with me and my brother Len Sutton and who else? Ian Connor. 4 of us went down. And we went and we got over to, Wakatip. And from Wakatip we
So that was to Christchurch by boat from Wellington, and from Wellington from Christchurch by train?
Bus, no train.
Okay, by bus.
Yeah, through Cromwell, through Central Otago to Wakatip, to Queenstown.
Right. Yep.
Then from Queenstown we got the boat, the old Earnslaw, running right up to Kinloch at the top.
Oh, okay.
And we got off at Kinloch.
Bill will continue the story shortly from where the Earnslaw drops them off at Kinloch at the top of Lake Wakatipu. But there are a lot of photos from Dad's album taken between Christchurch and Kinloch, which are included here. First, there are photos of Christchurch Cathedral and the modern electric trolley buses that ran at the time, plus the Avon River and the Botanic Gardens. Timaru must have been the next stop because we see a photo of Timaru Main Street and the very impressive Dunedin railway station. It's then inland through central Otago where we see a photograph of drought country and rabbits, plus the Omarama Hotel, where the bus must have stopped for a break. Quite a few photos were then taken in and around Queenstown, on the banks of Lake Wakatipu. We see the main street of Queenstown, and also a postcard that features the town and the lake and the mountain range behind, the Remarkables. Plus a selection of photographs of a small dinghy they hired for the day. There's even a photograph of them travelling along at top speed, which Dad describes, with, again, the remarkable mountains in the background. They stayed at the Queenstown Motor Park, and here's a view of the Remarkables and the town from the motor park. They went to the Botanic Gardens, and here's a photograph of the monument to Robert Scott of the Antarctic, plus a World War I gun, which apparently is no longer in the gardens. They stayed at the motor park, and here are their tents. There are some big redwood trees in Queenstown, and here they are standing out the front of the redwood tree out the front of the courthouse. The tree is still there 73 years later. We now see a photograph of the hire car the 4 men rented. And I remember Dad telling me about this once. As Dad explained, they wanted to go to the Skipper's Canyon Road, but the main condition of the rental agreement was that it would not be taken on the Skipper's Road. Well, here are some photographs of the car down the Skipper's Road. Just for the record, I did a web search of the Skipper's Road, and it's listed as New Zealand's most dangerous road. I also searched for rental cars and Skipper's Road, and appears the ban is still in place. Have a look at Bill's photos plus those online and you'll understand why.
When we got off there, there'd been a terrific rainstorm and the roads had been cut, so we couldn't go up. We were going to go through the Rootburn track over the Rootburn Valley. So we spent a couple of days sleeping on the house of the road foreman, helping him repair the road. He had an old truck. Us boys gave him a hand and they fed us, right? There's lots of washaways and everything. There's a suspension bridge over the Rootburn River. We had to cross that to get onto the track proper, because the Rootburn River runs into the head of Lake Wakatip, right? So that was a bad start, really. Anyway, it wasn't too bad. We had shelter in the foreman's house. Anyway, the weather cleared up, and thereafter it was pretty good. We walked the Routeburn Track into the Hollyford Valley, down to Lake Howden, Lake Mackenzie. It was all pretty rough country. There wasn't too many people walking then. This was 1947, because they hadn't got the track back after the war. Nothing had been done in the 6 years of the war, and they're only just starting on fixing the tracks up.
Bill will pick up the story again shortly from the Homer Tunnel at the end of the Routeburn Track. Looking at the map, the lads have now completed the red section, from the top of Lake Wakatipu and the Routeburn Valley up and over into the Hollyford Valley. They're about to start the yellow track through the unopened Homer Tunnel down into Milford Sound, which at the time was only accessible by sea. It is here at Milford Sound they meet with a rude shock, which Dad will describe. But first, here are Dad's photos taken along the trail.
When we got to Hollyford Valley, we got to the Homer Tunnel, and the whole village there had been left at the start of the war. You could just pick any hut you wanted and camp in it, which we did. The hole through the Homer Tunnel to Milford Sound was just a bored, rough rock hole. In fact, inside there was machinery just abandoned at the beginning of the war, so they started that job in the late 30s, and it hadn't been completed except the hole had been bored through. It was a very rough walk through it. So we walked through there, down to Milford Sound, which is probably 5 or 6 miles from the other entrance of the tunnel. And we got to Milford Hostel, and we bargained on buying bread there. Well, the manager said immediately, "You are not allowed on the Milford Track. The Milford Track is not open. You'll have to go back the way you come. The only way in here is by sea. There's no provision. You cannot buy anything from us." And he was very anti-us walking the Milford Track. He said the track is being repaired, and the only people that go out there are workers, right, working on the track. So by this time we met 2 blokes. One had been in the army, and the other, his friend, said, "What are we going to do?" He sort of joined up with us. He said, "I haven't been away 6 years in the army to be told by that bloke we can't go on the Milford Track." So he was a natural leader, and we come up with a plan. We squatted on the beach. We couldn't build a raft. There was nothing to build a raft, because you've got to cross from Milford to Lake Ada. You couldn't build a raft. There was all the timber would just sink. It was all wet. So we come up with the idea. We take a day fishing trip. Now, on a boat which ran. There was a few tourists in the hotel. They come only by sea though. So we got on this fishing boat for a day trip fishing, And when we got over the other side at Sandfly Point, it's called, nice name, well named, sandflies are awful there, terrible. We got off, we had lunch, got off the boat and just went into the bush and never came back. We took some fish with us as extra rations because we didn't have any rations. We had just enough, we had hardly enough to last. But it takes at least 3 days on when the track's in good nick to walk it. So we got into the bush, and the first hut we came to, Lake Ada, it's called, I forget its name now. Anyway, we said, well, we've got to be very careful here because there's track workers, and the word's going to get back to the manager at Milford that we're illegally on the track. So we walked early morning and lay up during the day and walked late afternoon when we knew that the workers wouldn't be working. So we did that and we walked up to as far as Pompolona Hut. That was right, we walked by there. Some of the huts are very hard to get by because there's a ravine comes in and they've got dogs in them too. So we, with their shoes around our neck and barefoot, we'd sneak past a hut, Pompolona, I remember. The dogs start barking when you just got to keep going, right? And someone would know, or perhaps they'd think it was a possum or something in the bush. When we got to the big Jervois Glacier, which is McKinnon's Pass to go over, our leader, I just forget his name now, he said, well look, I'll go ahead and reconnoitre. We can't go past it, someone will see us. He said, but I'll go up and find out the lay of the land. There's someone up there for sure. So he left us in the bush. We were heading well off the track in case there's any track workers or any officials came by. So he went and he came back after 2 or 3 hours and said, it's okay, there's a Maori bloke up there. His track is absolutely perfect, 300 or 400 yards of his side of his hut. Then it deteriorates into bush again. There's not much bush there, it's all grass. He said that bloke hates the manager at Milford. He said he's had a phone message on the landline. There was a single wire, the old-fashioned landline going through. He said, I've got to keep a lookout for you blokes. And tell the manager that you're here and I've got to detain you there somehow or other. He said he can go and get you-know-what, right, in rude language. He said he's a good bloke. He'll come up and he's got plenty of tucker there. He's got lots of cans of food kept for mountain people are lost and he'll feed us as well. So we all come out of the scrub and we all, the 6 of us there landed in his hut. He makes a great big stew in a kerosene tin and we hop into that. We were living on a few haricot beans. We couldn't catch any fish and we virtually had some rice and that we're really on starvation rations. The Maori track worker gave us some food to help us on our way, and we continued on down the Clinton Canyon and came to Lake Te Anau, past Lighthouse. Now the problem arose, how do we get down to Te Anau, because we didn't know when the boat was arriving, so we sat down on the beach, lit a fire, smoky fire to keep the mosquitoes and sandflies away. And after a couple of days the boat came up to the Bait House with tourists just for the day trip, and we got off. We got onto the boat and we had enough money, we just marched on the boat and said, could we have a fare down to Te Anau please? And he was greatly surprised, the launch master, to see the 6 boats just walk on the boat. Where had they come from? Well, he didn't worry too much as long as he got his fare, which we had. And then we got the boat down to Te Anau and the bus back to Christchurch, and we went back to work for a rest. The end of our holidays was a very, very physically demanding thing.